It was expected to be just another glamorous awards night in Los Angeles. Red carpet moments, flashing cameras, and the usual politically charged jokes dressed up as humor. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until Karoline Leavitt made her entrance. She wore a stunning deep green gown that hugged her figure perfectly, accented by her iconic silver cross resting just below her collarbone. Karoline walked in with unwavering poise, head held high, but she wasn't alone. By her side was her husband, Daniel Whitmore, a former Marine, quiet, grounded, not part of the Hollywood crowd, but the kind of man whose sheer presence commanded attention without saying a word. The media immediately took notice. "Who's that with Karoline?" someone whispered. "Is that her bodyguard?" "Nope, that's her husband, a veteran, I think." Inside the grand ballroom, chatter buzzed. Curiosity stirred as the couple took their seats. Then, the lights lowered, and the evening's host, Tom Cruise, stepped onto the stage. With his signature charm, tailored suit, and that razor-sharp wit that had embarrassed more than a few in the past, he launched into the night's opening. "Ladies and gentlemen," he grinned, "we've got it all tonight. Senators, movie stars, and even a few folks who still think the earth is flat." The crowd burst into laughter. "And now," he continued, "here comes Karoline Leavitt, America's favorite spark plug, dragging along a husband who looks like he just walked off a Marine recruitment billboard." Laughter rippled through the room again. Karoline's lips formed a polite smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Daniel's jaw clenched slightly. Tom wasn't finished. "To be honest," he added, "I thought that was her bodyguard, until I caught the wedding ring." "She married him? What, was Jason Bourne not available?" The laughter got louder. Karoline remained composed, her expression calm but ice cold. Daniel leaned over, speaking just low enough for her to hear. "You okay?" he asked. She gave a small nod. "I'm fine," she replied, "but he's not." As the camera glided past their table, Karoline quietly placed her napkin down, rose from her seat, and, with Daniel at her side, disappeared backstage. Meanwhile, Tom Cruise, still clueless about the storm he had just stirred, carried on with his jokes, completely unaware that the tone of the night had just shifted. He had just delivered his fourth punchline about Washington politics when, without warning, the ballroom lights flickered, then abruptly dimmed. Tom paused mid-sentence, blinking into the crowd, momentarily thrown off by the unexpected interruption. Something had changed. Suddenly, a fresh spotlight snapped on. Stage left. From the shadows stepped Karoline Leavitt. No one expected her. She wasn't on the evening's program. No invitation had been extended for her to speak. Yet there she was, composed, fearless, and unwavering, gliding across the stage like she belonged there, her heels clicking against the floor, slicing through the thick silence and disbelief in the room. Even Tom Cruise, ever the polished showman, was momentarily thrown off. He squinted toward the light, visibly flustered. Karoline? What are you doing?" he stammered. She walked up to the second microphone, took it in her hand, and without so much as a glance in his direction, turned her gaze toward the audience. "Well," she began, her voice clear and steady, "since Tom decided to include me in his monologue, I figured I might as well respond." A few uncomfortable chuckles scattered across the ballroom. "You know, it's one thing to stand on stage and joke about people who don't live in your world of scripts and spotlights. That's always been easy. But tonight, Tom didn't just take a shot at me. He took a swipe at my husband." The mood in the room shifted instantly. Champagne glasses frozen midair, conversations falling silent. "He's a man who spent 10 years in the United States Marine Corps. A man who faced real-life threats, not carefully choreographed explosions or green screen danger. Real life, real sacrifice." Even the most jaded A-listers sat up straighter in their seats. The tension was thick. Karoline continued, her voice unwavering. "When I walked into this ballroom tonight, I already knew I wasn't the usual kind of guest you're used to. I'm not here because I starred in a blockbuster or topped a streaming chart. I come from something different, something deeper. I come from a place of discipline, of honor, of people who understand that respect isn't something to be tossed around as the punchline of a joke." She turned her eyes, just briefly, toward Tom. His trademark grin was gone, replaced by something far less confident. "And about that joke," she added, now with a slight edge, "if you're going to make fun of my husband, at least be creative. Comparing him to Jason Bourne? That's cute, but let me be clear, Jason Bourne wouldn't last 10 seconds against my husband." That line detonated. The crowd erupted, cheers, claps, even a few standing ovations. In the back rows, a group of veterans stood tall, saluting her with pride in their eyes. Karoline waited patiently for the applause to settle, her expression steady. Then, with a measured breath, she delivered the final blow. "Tom, I don't need to be a movie star to take control of a stage. I just need to speak the truth." And with that, she turned around, walking calmly off stage as the spotlight flickered behind her, still glowing, but now empty. Backstage, Daniel stood just behind the curtain, waiting. "That was something," he said softly. Karoline smiled, her eyes reflecting both strength and calm. "Finally," she replied, "and that was only the beginning." Meanwhile, on stage, Tom Cruise was pacing like a lion trapped in a cage that felt smaller by the second. His smile had vanished. His rhythm was broken. In his earpiece, the producers scrambled to control the damage. "Let it go, Tom," a voice whispered urgently. "Just stick to the script. Move on." But Tom Cruise wasn't the kind of man who backed down. He wasn't wired that way. Karoline's unexpected speech had hit him like a clean right hook to the jaw, sharp, public, and impossible to ignore. And now, the cameras were rolling. Every angle, every frame. Meanwhile, social media was exploding. Clips of Karoline's words, especially her mic drop moment. "I don't need to be a movie star to command a stage. I just need to tell the truth," were going viral at lightning speed. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, every platform was on fire with reactions, retweets, and praise. Her name was trending within minutes. But Tom didn't care about trends. He didn't care about applause or public opinion, not when he felt like he'd just been one-upped on his own stage. He wanted to reclaim control. He wanted to win. So, with a forced grin and a stiff tug at his sleeves, he strode back out into the spotlight. "Well," he said, voice slightly raised, "looks like I just got a lecture from the First Lady of Fox News." A few hesitant laughs broke out. Most of the room, however, just stared, unsure whether to laugh or leave. "But hey," Tom continued, clearly digging in, "let's be honest. If I had $1 for every time a conservative told me they were offended, I'd be even richer than I already am." A few claps echoed, but they were scattered, weak. The tension in the air was unmistakable. Tom, ignoring the discomfort, kept pushing. "Look, I respect the troops. I really do. But let's not confuse being married to a Marine with understanding leadership. There's a big difference between actual experience and plain old ego." Oof, that line didn't land. It crashed. The room didn't tense. It froze. Even the people seated at Tom's own table looked down into their glasses, not because what he said was daring, but because it was tone-deaf, reckless, plain dumb. Backstage, Daniel Whitmore had remained silent through it all, his eyes fixed on the monitor, arms crossed, still as stone. But now, he moved. "You okay with me walking out there?" he asked. Karoline, his voice calm but loaded with intent. She didn't say a word, just stepped aside, giving him a clear path. Seconds later, the double doors at the back of the ballroom creaked open. All heads turned. It wasn't Karoline this time. It was him, Daniel Whitmore, 6'2", broad shoulders, former Marine. Every step he took down that aisle radiated a kind of quiet intensity that couldn't be faked. He wasn't hurrying. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't apologizing. He was arriving. The audience shifted in their seats, almost in slow motion. Conversations stopped. Phones were lowered. Even Tom Cruise, ever the showman, looked up with uncertainty in his eyes as the footsteps grew louder. Then Daniel reached the front. "Can I say something?" he asked calmly, looking directly at Tom. The mic tech, stunned, didn't hesitate. He handed him a live microphone without a word. Daniel turned toward the audience first, then slowly faced Tom. "You can crack all the jokes you want," he said, voice steady, eyes locked in. "But the second you questioned her leadership, you made it personal." He let that hang in the air for just a beat. "She earned her voice," he added. "You just act like you deserve yours." Boom. One line, one moment, one devastating truth, and the entire room reacted. The entire front row let out an audible gasp. Tom Cruise was frozen, unable to find a single word. His trademark smirk had vanished, replaced by a stunned, expressionless silence. Daniel gave a single respectful nod, handed the microphone back without fanfare, and turned around. No victory lap, no smug glance. He simply walked off the stage the same way he'd entered, strong, steady, and in total control. He didn't need to say another word, but the silence he left behind, it roared. By the time the awards show abruptly cut to commercial break, social media especially the newly rebranded X, formerly Twitter, was already in a digital frenzy. Hashtags like "Nah, Daniel did that," "Marine McDrop," and "Sit Down Tom" were trending across the country within minutes. Clips of Daniel's calm, controlled walk to the stage and his devastating one-liner, "She earned her voice. You just act like you deserve yours," had already been recorded from every angle, reposted, turned into GIFs, slowed down for dramatic effect, and remixed with epic music in the background. It was more than a moment. It was a movement. Here was a former Marine, speaking not with outrage or ego, but with measured, dignified truth, and America listened. Fox News was first out of the gate with a primetime segment. Karoline Leavitt's husband shocks Hollywood with silent strength. But surprisingly, it wasn't just the conservative networks running with the story. CNN. Anchor Caitlin Collins opened her segment reading a now viral quote. Veteran confronts Tom Cruise. "You just act like you deserve it." Even late-night comedy shows that normally had Tom Cruise's back, Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, even Seth Meyers, didn't rush to his defense this time. They paused. They hesitated. Why? Because this wasn't funny anymore. This didn't feel like a cheeky celebrity jab. It looked like a man, backed by fame and arrogance, punching down, while a couple stood up for something real, something deeper. By morning, Caroline's inbox was overflowing. Thousands of emails from supporters, veterans organizations, college students, even reporters who had never covered her before, and they all said nearly the same thing. You didn't have to yell. You didn't have to stoop to their level. You didn't insult. You just showed up with a man of honor, and the truth did the rest. Meanwhile, Daniel wasn't checking Twitter. He wasn't watching the clips. He wasn't even reading the headlines. He was in the kitchen, calmly brewing coffee like it was any ordinary morning. The scent of dark roast filled the air. Caroline, still in her robe, stood in the doorway watching him. "You know," she said with a smirk, "you kind of blew up the internet last night." Daniel glanced over, half smiling. "I didn't do anything special. I just told the truth." Caroline raised an eyebrow and chuckled. Exactly. That's why it worked. Back in Los Angeles, the mood was far different. Tom Cruise sat alone in his private home office, staring at multiple screens, each one playing a different version of the viral clip. He watched his own expression fade on repeat, watched the internet frame him as the villain of the night, watched Daniel become a symbol of humility, power, and principle. His name wasn't trending because of a movie role or a box office hit. He was trending for being publicly, and rightfully, put in his place. "That man is dangerous," Tom muttered under his breath. And he wasn't talking about Daniel's military past. He was talking about something far more threatening to someone like Tom: influence. Behind him, his team was in chaos. Interns were frantically scanning social media, flagging the harshest videos and memes. Publicists were on the phones with Vanity Fair, GQ, Variety, pitching exclusive interviews to try and pivot the story. "We can frame it as a joke gone too far," one aide suggested. "Or maybe a misunderstanding," another offered. Tom stared at them, cold and unreadable. "No," he said firmly. "We don't apologize." The room fell dead silent, but deep inside, Tom knew he was losing something far more valuable than screen time: control. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Karoline Leavitt stood poised at the White House press podium. She didn't mention the awards show. She didn't bring up Tom Cruise. She wasn't there for drama, but the media couldn't help themselves. A CNN correspondent raised her hand. "Ms. Leavitt, any comment on last night's viral moment?" Caroline gave a small, composed smile. Calm, graceful, unshaken. "I think what my husband said spoke louder than anything I could have added," she said. "He wasn't defending me. He was defending respect." Boom. That quote alone hit 1 million views by noon. And just like that, the narrative shifted. Not around Hollywood or politics, but around something that mattered more: dignity. Caroline turned toward the camera, now with millions of Americans watching, many holding their breath. "You sued me, Mr. Cruise," she said calmly, "claiming I harmed your reputation." She paused, letting the silence speak louder than any shout could. But reputation isn't built on red carpets and movie roles. It's built on how you treat people when no one's watching, especially those who can't give you anything in return. She gently tapped the flash drive on the desk beside her. "This isn't gossip, it's record. This isn't revenge, it's responsibility." The screen cut briefly to Tucker Green, visibly stunned, his usual smirk replaced with something rare: respect. He leaned in, clearly grasping the gravity of what Caroline had just unleashed. Back at home, Daniel sat in their living room, watching it unfold in real time. He didn't blink, he didn't move, he just listened, coffee in hand, pride in his eyes. Across the country, the reaction was instant and overwhelming. Cable news networks dropped their scheduled programming. News tickers at the bottom of every major broadcast ran ran in bold red. Breaking, Karoline Leavitt responds to Tom Cruise lawsuit with bombshell file on 2019. Charity dispute on X. Hashtags exploded once more. Gibson 19. Receipts, not rumors. Karoline unleashed veterans groups began issuing official statements. Multiple former organizers of the 2019 charity event confirmed what Karoline had revealed, that Cruise had promised funding, then disappeared without explanation, leaving the nonprofit scrambling and service members disappointed. One retired Army colonel even went on MSNBC and said, "She's not just right, she's brave, and she's doing what none of us had the platform to do back then." Meanwhile, inside a sleek crisis suite in Beverly Hills, Tom Cruise stood in front of a massive screen wall as the footage played on loop. "She brought out the charity files," one aide whispered. "She had them the whole time," another added. Tom turned slowly toward his legal counsel. "Did you know she had that?" The lawyer shook his head, pale. "No. We didn't think she was involved in 2019. She was junior staff." Tom's jaw clenched. "Well, she's not junior anymore." His PR manager spoke up cautiously. "We can still try to settle this. Issue a joint statement. Maybe say we're both committed to supporting veterans moving forward." Tom stared at the screen again. The flash drive, the documents, the raw power of someone with nothing to lose and everything to say. "No," he muttered. "We don't settle. We silence." But even he didn't believe it this time, because for the first time in his storied, carefully controlled career, Tom Cruise was no longer directing the spotlight. Karoline Leavitt was, and she wasn't done yet. "But what I have here isn't hearsay," Karoline said calmly. "It's your own words." She held up the flash drive like a final piece of a courtroom puzzle. "So, if we're going to court, I'll be bringing this. But if you want to drop the lawsuit, I'm willing to consider a public apology. Not to me, to the veterans you ghosted." And just like that, the online chaos reignited, like a second lightning strike tearing through silence. The internet didn't just react, it roared. People started sharing old photos from the 2019 Veterans event. Images showed half-empty rows, confused families, and an untouched podium. One post read, "My dad waited all day for Cruise. We were told he'd show." Karoline's telling the truth. This wasn't gossip anymore. CNN picked it up. So did NBC. Meanwhile, Tom Cruise said nothing. Absolutely nothing. His lawyer refused interviews. His publicist declined all comments. And on his own X account, he remained completely silent. At home, Daniel leaned over his laptop watching the news unfold in real time. "He's not going to say a word, is he?" Karoline gave a knowing shake of her head. "He already said enough, on paper." But the backlash wasn't just political now. It hit the glass walls of Hollywood, where silence usually protects the powerful. That silence shattered. The Gibson 19 file Karoline mentioned turned out to be very real. Leaked memos confirmed Tom's cancellation wasn't due to scheduling conflicts. It was branding. He didn't show because the charity had conservative roots. Too rural, too red, one assistant from Tom's team wrote. Suddenly, headlines weren't about tabloid feuds. They were about reputations. But no one could have predicted what came next. Keanu Reeves stepped forward, quiet, respected, a man known for avoiding drama until something mattered. He posted a rare statement on X. "I was invited to the same 2019 Veterans event. I attended, Tom didn't. I saw the disappointment on those faces." Karoline Leavitt spoke the truth, and veterans deserve better than being forgotten for optics. That post went nuclear. 5 million views in hours. Reporters froze. Reeves had just broken the unwritten Hollywood rule by calling out a fellow A-lister and siding with a political figure. Within hours, others followed. An anonymous B-list actor told Variety, "We've all seen Cruise bail when something doesn't benefit his brand." Karoline just had the receipts. A producer tweeted, mocking a Marine's family and suing them. Karoline had every right to clap back. Even a liberal columnist wrote on Substack, "You don't have to like her politics to recognize what's right." Tom lost the moment he made it personal. And yet, Karoline stayed silent. No retweets, no media rounds. When asked about Keanu's statement, she replied simply, "That took courage. I respect it deeply." Meanwhile, Tom's team was spinning out. "We need a counter-narrative," his publicist said in a meeting. "No," Tom growled. "We need this to die." But it was far too late. Even late-night hosts started joking nervously. Tom Cruise challenged a Marine's wife and got knocked out by a flash drive. Back home, Daniel gave a faint smile as he watched his wife handle the storm with grace. "Did you ever think Keanu Reeves would back you up?" Karoline smirked. "Honestly, I was hoping Clint Eastwood, but I'll take it." Then came the smear campaign. An anonymous gossip blog ran a shady piece titled, "Is Karoline Leavitt really the patriot she claims to be?" It was vague, but meant to sting. Claims of staff mistreatment, White House tension, and accusations that she was using her husband's military record to boost her image. By noon, 4 more blogs copied it. By evening, a slanderous narrative had formed, but this time, the public didn't take the bait. Karoline wasn't surprised. She had studied how the game worked. When you lose on the stage, you attack in the shadows, but she was ready. Weeks earlier, she'd quietly built her defense. Internal staff reviews, exit interviews, never before seen footage of her supporting veterans, letters from those who served beside her husband. It was all real, all documented, and she called it truth over spin. Then she dropped it all in one post. Some people fight in the open, others in the shadows. I prefer receipts. Here's mine. Attached was a 2-minute video montage, veterans embracing her, staffers testifying to her leadership, a retired general stating, "Karoline Leavitt shows more honor in her pinky than most do in an entire career." 10 million views in 6 hours. Keanu Reeves reposted it with just 3 words. "This is integrity." Inside Tom Cruise's crisis bunker, panic turned to fear. "She's building a legal fortress," his lawyer whispered. "She's not just winning," his PR rep added. "She's winning hearts. You made her bigger." Tom Cruise watched her video loop again and again. Once, he was the face of American heroism, but now, America had a new one, and she didn't need a studio. 2 days later, without warning or press, Cruise's legal team quietly dropped the defamation threat. No statement, no apology, just silence. But for Karoline Leavitt, it wasn't enough to win quietly. She had one more thing to say. At the Veterans Honor Summit in Virginia, in front of generals, military families, and volunteers, Karoline stepped onto the stage in a sharp navy blazer, her silver cross glinting in the autumn sun. The crowd went silent. Some expected a victory speech, maybe a final jab, but she gave them something deeper. A few weeks ago, someone with power mocked the man I love, not just his service, but the values that define him. And when we stood up, it wasn't about politics or headlines. We stood for something too many are afraid to defend: honor, faith, respect. Thunderous applause erupted, but she raised her hand gently. "This isn't about Tom Cruise. It never was. This is for every family who's been belittled for believing in something greater. Every wife who was told she was too loud, too proud, too patriotic. Every veteran forgotten when the cameras stopped rolling. I didn't win because I had more followers. I won because I refused to be silent." The audience rose in a standing ovation. Even journalists were wiping their eyes. Daniel stood quietly at the edge of the stage, arms crossed, his pride unmistakable. A letter from Keanu Reeves was read aloud. "Courage isn't always bullets or battlefields. Sometimes it's standing up with truth when the spotlight tries to blind you." That night, the headlines weren't about Tom. They were about Karoline. Karoline Leavitt ends the fight with grace and power. From lawsuit to leadership, how one press secretary outshined Hollywood. Not just Trump's voice, a voice for millions. Back home, Karoline placed the now famous flash drive back into a drawer, not as a trophy, as a reminder. "I didn't win because I'm perfect," she told Daniel. "I won because I stood when others sat." Some people think fame protects them, but today we saw that truth speaks louder. Louder than studios, louder than status. Karoline didn't just fight back. She rewrote the entire script. If this story shook you, just imagine what's coming next. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a moment where truth flips the narrative. This is Surprising Stories, where every voice matters and no spotlight is too bright for the truth. See you in the next one.